This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
It's time for your weekly Lions fix, and yes, a little bit of wrestling talk as well, here on the Hindsight 20.
Time to play the game. Time to play the game. It's all about the game.
This is the Hindsight 20 podcast. I am your host, Jerry Mallory. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. As always, a proud member of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Today's show, it's going to be fun. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to try to get into it one by one. We'll talk about some of the free agent signings. They may look a little bit minor in nature. No home run hits this past week, but there were a few solid signings that we're going to discuss. After that, we're going to continue the Know Your Foe segment. Last week, we talked about the Chicago Bears. This week, staying in the NFC North, as we will be doing for this segment, we take a look at the men who play at Lambeau Field and the Green Bay Packers. Got to talk about Wrestlemania, right? I'm starting to notice that a lot of Lions fans are fans of wrestling as well. Maybe, I don't know, our separation from reality at times, being hopeful forever, dreaming, suspending our disbelief. Not sure. We're not going to dedicate too much time, but a nice 10-minute chunk. I'll give you exact markers. If you're not a wrestling fan, you can skip that section, but I know a lot of you are. So we got to talk a little bit of Wrestlemania, and then we'll close it out with some draft goodness. I've got an obsession, and I'll tell you what that obsession is. And you know what? I'll tell you what the obsession is right now. I've got an obsession with the second round in the NFL draft. And this is not something new. I've had this obsession with the second round for quite some time because it always seems as though there's a big name, a name we thought would go in the first round that always falls in the second. So what I went ahead and did was I looked at, for whatever reason, guys who fell from last 5 drafts. I'll give you a big name that was supposed to go in the first round. We'll talk about why they fell. And after that, I'll look at some talented guys that got picked in the second round. Maybe they weren't projected to go first round, but some of these 5 guys I'm going to mention, last 5 years, really lit the world on fire despite not being a first round pick, getting picked in the second round. And then I'll wrap it up, giving you 5 names that could fit that category this year. A person that should be in the first round, but they'll fall for whatever reason and could very well be one of the better picks despite not being picked on the first day. Let's get right into this thing. Okay, wait, not right into it because number one, I've just talked for about 2 minutes. But number two, gotta take care of a little in-house business. DetroitSportsPodcast.com is where we can be found. If you have iTunes, that's great. That probably means you have an iPhone. Go ahead, subscribe. You can do the same if you have an Android. That's easy as well. You just go to the Podbay application. There are several other applications that you can use. I prefer to use the Podbay, Podbay app. It's not just me on this lovely network. The cast and crew is amazing. Doc and Jock, Tigers Talk. Hey, I keep talking about how close the season is. For the last month, I'm like, hey, before you know it, when my next show drops, the season will have already began. It may be snow on the ground for opening day. We don't know, but Tigers Talk, this is the perfect time to dip into that. Fantasy Geeks, one-on-one, Detroit Sports Countdown. It's all here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Let's talk about some of the signings. You got Schwartz and you got Hill. These are minor signings. Hill, I'm not going to act like I know a lot about him. I don't. He's been in the league for a little bit. I mean, I know the name. He started some games for the Jets a few years ago. I'm guessing this is the veteran, a cornerback that will go in there and, compete with Nevin Lawson, be an insurance backup for Nevin Lawson. I was hoping for someone with a little bit more success, albeit maybe a little bit older. I was looking at Leon Hall. I felt like he could portray the role of Rasheem Mathis quite well, but they've gone a little bit younger. And I look at this signing and say they still will probably be bringing in another veteran. If Slay goes down and you're looking at Lawson and Hill as your 2 starting cornerbacks, that's a little bit tight. I would love to see a guy like Leon Hall be there. A little older, there is durability concerns, but the talent, I think, is still there. And so I'm looking forward to another signing. And this one is, like I said, probably a minor one. Now, Jeff Schwartz, Mr. Schwartz, offensive guard / offensive tackle. He's not coming in to start, but I like it. It's a veteran signing, someone that can move along the offensive line. I think this signing means we still just might go out and get another veteran tackle. This may be the backup to Laken Tomlinson and Larry Warford. He's not necessarily the guard center that Manny Ramirez was a few years ago, but he certainly can play both the tackle and the guard spot, probably more suited as a guard. If need be, though, he could slide in as your right tackle. I don't think he supplants Michael Ola. Michael Ola did pretty good. And maybe it was pretty good because everyone else was so bad that played right tackle last year. Adrian Waddle, Cornelius Lucas. But he certainly was better than those two guys. You're looking at Ola probably as your starter. And then, Schwartz can kind of squeeze in there. But he's probably going to be the primary backup, like I said, for the two young guys, Laken, just in his second year. Larry Warford, his fourth year coming up now. And he's had some injury concerns. So you like what Schwartz can bring. No, not talking about Jim. We're talking about Jeff. So there still may be a need or there still may be a signing, because I still think there is a need for one more veteran that can play offensive tackle. I said it again last week. I'm going to say it again this week. Sign one, draft one when we're talking about tackles. And so I don't know if Schwartz necessarily fits that bill. We still may be in that sign one mode. We're certainly going to draft one. Just don't know what round. I'm getting the feeling, though, it's going to be round one. I want to spend a little bit more time talking about Stephen Ridley. I like Ridley quite a bit. Coming out of, LSU. He had a pretty good college career. Got picked up by the New England Patriots. I believe that year they went back-to-back. They went Shane Vereen, who I want to say played at Cal. And then you had Ridley, back-to-back rounds. And it was like a two-headed monster. Vereen's a good signing because I think he comes in instantly and is your number 2 running back behind Amir Abdullah. There may be some situations where he may even start if Amir Abdullah goes down, if the fumbles resurface, and he's a power back. You're looking at Ridley, you're pretty much saying Joique Bell out, Ridley in. Now, he did not have a good season last year. He just couldn't stay on the field. He only had 36 catches, or rather attempts, so he didn't do much. Before that, there was some production, particularly right after he got drafted. Now, the first year was solid. He had 441 yards. That's pretty good. Year number 2, this guy was looking like he was going to be the next good to great running back. Because in year number 2, 2012, and he started 12 of those games, he had 1,263 yards and 12 touchdowns. So, he kind of came out of nowhere and really made an impact. There's been some injuries, and that has limited him. He went 1 year there with the New York Jets and just couldn't stay on the field. He was hurt. And so by means of that, they decided to go other ways. Chris Ivory looked pretty good for the Jets last year. He's over with the Jaguars. That being said, they still, didn't seem as though they were too excited about bringing back Stephen Ridley. Ridley's talking a good game so far. He's saying he's going to surprise some people. He's looking forward to joining with the Lions, that, he's going to make a difference. He's on that 1 year deal, which is kind of that's the norm for veterans, when they've got a few injuries and, a 1 year show me deal. We've signed quite a few guys to that. And now, he's another one that, you buy low and you hope that you get a high return out of him. Again, Amir Abdullah, is he a every down running back? Is he a workhorse? I don't know about that. And so with that being said, Stephen Ridley may be getting more carries than you would think. He may be someone that gets 10 carries a game to 12. Perhaps Amir Abdullah is struggling or he gets hurt. If he gets hurt, Stephen Ridley's going to be your guy. And so, in this league where you have tons of injuries and, the second year, we're expecting big things from Abdullah, but we don't know. You've got a guy you've brought in on a 1 year deal, an affordable contract that has already been there and done that. Playing with a quality organization, rushing for 1,200 yards. The sky's the limit for this guy. I really do like this signing. I feel as though it's an under-the-radar move, someone that can play big dividends, someone that could come in and, if healthy, of course, that's always what you have to worry about. If healthy, he could be a steal of a signing, as it were. I still feel like Theo Riddick, as great of a pass catcher he is in the running back position, when he gets the ball and he's running, I just don't see a lot, okay? I don't see the fireworks. I don't see him ever being the running back that you can just, give to, be your Kyle Bell and make things go. So in terms of rushing, Abdullah should get the lion's share, pun intended, of the carries, but Stephen really won't be that far behind. So where does this leave, our running back situation? A lot of people asking about Zach Zenner. Keep in mind, Zach Zenner had a good preseason, but it was a preseason. Keep in mind, playing at the small school, and then he got hurt right off the bat. No matter what, this guy wasn't going to come in and be your number two. We love that, the AA and the ZZ, Thunder and Lightning, but realistically, that was never going to be the case. Not even last year. Even if he stayed healthy, he would have been entrenched in the fourth spot behind Amir, or behind Joik, behind Theo. It's the same this year. If we're looking at, in terms of carries, it's going to be Amir, in my opinion, followed by Steven, followed by Theo, and then Mr. Zach Zenner. He'll get in there, get in where you fit in type of thing. In terms of catching, everything kind of switches around. Theo at the top, followed by Amir Abdullah. And so I'm not crying about Zach Zenner. Are we holding him back? If he's that good, he'll find his way on the field. It's not like Stephen Ridley, we just signed him to a 5-year, $50 million deal. No, we signed him to a 1-year show me deal. If he gets, outplayed by Zach Zenner, which I don't think he will, Zach Zenner will play. So don't worry about it. Now, one guy I was looking forward to signing was Bruce Carter. Really like this guy coming out of North Carolina, the Lions. They were interested. They talked to him. He ultimately signed with the Jets. But looking at who we didn't bring in, but who we were interested in, kind of tells me their plans going forward with the linebacker position. For one, Bruce Carter is an outside linebacker. If you brought him in, more than likely he would have been your starter at the outside spot. I don't think he would have been brought in to be a backup, but you never know. All depends on what happens in the draft, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that we haven't looked at a ton of middle linebackers or any tells me what we already assumed. Tahir Whitehead will be assuming his role as the middle linebacker. Keep in mind the amount of success that he had, just 2 years ago in 2014, when Stephen Tulloch went down, this guy came in and he produced at a very high level. There was little to no drop off. And the way the NFL is now, the bigger kind of stout, but not as fast linebacker, the Stephen Tulloch linebacker. Yeah, I don't even care if it's the middle. It's kind of going the way of the dodo bird. And, we all thought that Tahir Whitehead, wanted to be a middle linebacker. Perhaps that was part of the negotiations with him. Hey, I'll sign back if, I'm able to assume that role. To me, you look at the fact that they haven't talked to any other middle linebackers, and then the guy they brought in to potentially start was an outside, means that, Tahir Whitehead's going to be in the middle. And that's probably where he should be. That's where we want him. And I think that is going to be big when you've got Levy and you've got Tahir. Just find that next guy. It's funny, though. That next guy should be on our team. 2nd round pick out of BYU. He had all the success. He was roommates with Ziggy Ansah. This was supposed to be the perfect match, right? Kyle Van Noy. And it just hasn't happened yet. He may get that opportunity this year, perhaps. But it hasn't looked good, man. I think I've seen him rush the quarterback once or twice. That was, good for him. You know what? I'm not going to sit here and talk about Kyle Van Noy any longer. I'm not going to bore you. I'm not going to bore myself. The bottom line is with this guy, we expected him to produce. He's been hurt. He hasn't done much, and he's a high-round pick. Guys like him and Gabe Wright are on notice, I think, for both of them. If they don't show us a little bit something, and maybe Gabe gets that 3rd year, like Kyle Van Noy is getting, his 4th year almost. Man, it's disappointing. This is Kyle's 3rd year. And so, maybe Gabe Wright gets his 3rd year like Kyle is getting. But at the end of the day, guys like him and Gabe Wright are on notice. We spent high draft picks for them, essentially a 3rd for Gabe Wright this year, and the 4th that we actually spent on him last year. It's time to see production. And, I haven't seen it yet. I don't know what the front office thinks, but it remains to be seen. Let's get into the Know Your Foe segment before we get into the break. Last week, we talked about Chicago Bears. Now, the rumor is with Muhammad Wilkerson being on the market, the Bears still having money to spend. I don't know how all these free agents they've brought in. The Bears are a potential target for him. We didn't get a chance to talk about that. That would be quite formidable if, with the signings they already made, they go out and they get a guy like that. But we've talked about the Bears already. It's time for the Green Bay Packers. And they had a down year by normal Packers standards. Down year for them is still 10-6 and winning a wild card spot. Now, Aaron Rodgers was not the normal Aaron Rodgers. But check this out. Now, this is arguably Aaron Rodgers' worst statistical year since, he was a young buck. And in his bad year, he still had 31 touchdowns to only 8 interceptions. Now, the big issue was his completion percentage. It took a nosedive. I mean, it dropped almost 5% from 0.6 to 60.7. And the loss of Jordy Nelson was felt. Devontae Adams got a bigger role, and he didn't really step up to the plate. We all know the infamous season for them. One of the highlights was certainly one of the lowlights for our beloved Detroit Lions. It was an event that I'm not going to mention by name, but we know that it was very disappointing, okay, to say the least. Lo and behold, it happened again. And I'll mention it when it's talking about the Arizona Cardinals. They went out and completed another Hail Mary. This time, it was with a playoff on the line. Win or go home situation. Those guys did it again. And it was all for naught. They wind up not, being able to get it done. They lost to the Arizona Cardinals, and that was that. And yes, I guess I'll go ahead and, for the Tupac fans out there, they know what this song is. Screw it. This song is Hail Mary. The Green Bay Packers, I will be reluctantly, as I continue talking about them, playing the Hail Mary instrumental in the background because, I don't know, maybe I'm self-loathing. Maybe I like to cause pain, and I like to do things they're not too easy, even for myself. But like I said, Aaron Rodgers, even with the supposed down year, still, pretty good stats, 31-8. The completion percentage was low. Losing Jordy Nelson hurt. Mr. Lacy, Eddie, he's usually big. He was even bigger. And it looked as though, Coach McCarthy and the rest of the crew kind of gave him the ultimatum and said, hey, get in shape or find another team. And by all accounts, Eddie Lacy's lost weight. It's an addition by subtraction, if you will, subtraction of pounds. And if he can get back to his old form, we know Eddie Lacy, his first couple years, really did well. And the weight kind of just got out of hand. And now, supposedly, he's primed for a better season because he's thinner. That remains to be seen. Now, in terms of free agency, not a ton happened with this team. They didn't lose too much. They lost Scott Tolzien. Okay, whoop-de-doo. And then they lost Casey Hayward. Now, Casey Hayward is a fine cornerback, guy that they drafted not too many years ago. He went ahead and signed a decent contract with the San Diego Chargers. Now, keep in mind, they lose him, but in the draft last year, it was Demarius Randall in the first round, and then it was Quentin Rollins. Now, Quentin Rollins had a pretty good rookie season. In fact, he's someone that I like the Lions to have picked, but they didn't. They didn't go that direction, but he had a pretty good rookie year, and he's someone that is flexible and versatile in terms of can play safety, can play corner. So you got to look out for those two young guys. I think both Randall and Rollins has the potential to shore up that backfield for the Green Bay Packers. Now, they didn't do much in terms of free agency. They brought in Jared Cook. Jared Cook's pretty good. He's an athletic guy. And, on this team, when you've got people still clamoring for the days of Jermichael Finley, who was an athletic tight end, Jared Cook, I guess, is a good replacement, if you will. They've been talking about Jermichael Finley for all this time. It's like, get over it, guys. I still think they may be looking at tight end. I don't know if it's Hunter Henry or who they may be looking to bring in. You've got Richard Rodgers in there. And so Jared Cook kind of falls in with that. They've also re-signed a few guys. They're bringing back Nick Perry and their kicker, Mason Crosby, who, he kind of had an up and down year last year. He's usually a little bit more sure-footed, but he wasn't. Let's face it, guys. When talking about the Packers, it comes down to Aaron Rodgers, who is still one of the best in the league. You bring back Jordy Nelson. They always draft well. They don't rely on free agents and free agency. So the fact that they didn't sign a lot of guys, to me, doesn't mean a whole lot. Will they bounce back? The chinks in their armor, will it kind of be exposed more this year. We played them really good. Both games, 1-1, lost 1. Both games could have went either way. Essentially, in terms of head-to-head, we were evenly matched with this team. And although the Minnesota Vikings won the division, and they're younger, and they've got all this talent, they've got the young coach and Mike Zimmer, not young in age, but young in experience as a head coach, it's still Green Bay's division. I think they have to not be the champions for 2 consecutive seasons before I'm saying anyone else is the class of this division. Minnesota's right there. Lions are trying to get better. I think we have and will. I think the Bears have and will. But, I can talk about the lack of signings, and I can talk about Aaron Rodgers struggling. When it comes down to it, these guys, as usual, are going to be a formidable force. All right, guys, let's cut off that Hail Mary music. We're going to come back in just a second. When we do, we're going to talk a little Wrestlemania, and then my obsession with the second round, I'll share it with you. You can live in my agony or live in my ecstasy. It goes back and forth with this thing. As much as I obsess over the second round, you guys will get a chance to do just the same. So stay right here on the Hindsight 20 podcast. Jerry Mallory here for the Hindsight 20. It's time to do a little business. Your ad can be placed right here. It's simple. Send us an email, hindsight20podcast@gmail.com. Hey, we only support the best businesses. So if you want to have your company and your fine product mentioned, not just on this show, but on the Detroit Sports Network, one of the fastest growing local podcasts in the Metro Detroit area, you know what to do. hindsight20podcast@gmail.com. Oh, I feel like I'm joining my boys at the Pride Detroit podcast. That's a little John Cena, who made his return at Wrestlemania. Listen, I know, all of you, or maybe many of you, I don't know, the exact number of those that are wrestling fans. This is the part, after break, I usually give you my story time. Sometimes it's about music or a number of different things. We're going to give about 6 or 7 minutes to wrestling at this point. So I'm going to hold up to my end of the deal. I'll say this. I'll give you 6 minutes of wrestling, Wrestlemania talk. So you can look at your timer if you're not a big fan of wrestling and fast forward the podcast if you want. Don't go away. Don't be foolish. You fast forward 6 minutes. And then once you do that, you'll be hearing us talk about our second round draft dilemma, goodness, ecstasy and agony, the obsession I have, back to the Lions and back to the NFL. But for the next 6 minutes, like I said, it's time to talk a little WWE and WrestleMania, the granddaddy of them all. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Now, the results and some of the things we expected did not go according to many of our prognostications. However, I will say it was very much so enjoyable. One of the fun moments, one of the most fun to me was, of course, the New Day. Now, the New Day they're the new Freebirds. They're the Glee Birds. And, when a team and a group of guys, you can hate them, but when they're just entertaining, it gets to a point. And I love to see that transition where fans are like, you know what? These guys are entertaining. And now, as we know, they're completely over. And the League of Nations defeating them, that was cool, whatever. You're trying to establish them as a nice heel group. But when that music hit and HBK came out, the little boy in me definitely came out. My wife looks and says, you look like a little kid at times when you're watching wrestling, especially when some of these legacy guys, I grew up on the Attitude Era. So for Stone Cold and Shawn Michaels and Mick Foley to come out, just awesome. Shawn Michaels, HBK, my opinion, the best wrestler of all time. My favorite of all time, to say the least. Now, I'm not a huge wrestling fan anymore, but I have to give credit and props to the WWE Network because since the network has come out, and you have access to these pay-per-views, that's only $10 a month. I went from, I hadn't ordered a pay-per-view in, 10 plus years, probably more than that, like 13, 14 years. And I would watch Raw maybe 3-4 times a year. Access to the old stuff, access to the pay-per-views. And lo and behold, I watch most of the pay-per-views. I don't watch them all. Watch all of the big ones for sure. Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, WrestleMania, and Raw. I don't sit there and watch 3 hours like I used to, but I'll watch a portion of Raw almost every week. And so it turned someone that used to be a huge fan in his teenage years, as he got older, not much of a fan, to, kind of back in the swing of things. Certainly not at the same level, because, hey, I will watch Raw over Monday Night Football. That's how much I was into it. But the network has kind of, brought back a casual to diehard to casual to non-existent back to semi-casual fan. But the smart mark in me still lives. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, seeing those guys from the Attitude Era was pretty cool. The Rock, his program with the Wyatt family, that was nice. I really like the comment The Rock made about Bray Wyatt. And it's true. The promo he cut was good. What he said was true. The ring presence and the charisma and, the mic skills of Bray Wyatt, it is impressive. And so that was cool to see that program happen. And then John Cena joining him. That was very nice as well. Women's Championship, it was cool. Number one, I'm glad they got rid of that belt. I'm not like this feminist movement guy, but the belt they had before the Divas belt, to me, was quite disrespectful. Was it like a butterfly on there? I mean, these are athletes. We know they're girls. Doesn't have to be a straight up manly looking belt, but really like a little bedazzled butterfly looking deal. So the new belt looks cool. Like I'm about to choke up and cry. Like Ric Flair seeing his daughter walk down the arena at WrestleMania. The new belt looks cool. And I like the heel, the dirtiest player in the game kind of part 2 deal that's going on with Charlotte Flair. I think that's pretty cool as well. Hell in a Cell, hey, Shane O'Mac, the guy, he went out there and did what he had to do. All props to him. I was curious to see how this was going to go. I didn't see a scenario where Undertaker lost necessarily, but Shane is back, and we all want to kind of see that McMahon versus McMahon feud. And so Shane having control of Raw made so much sense. So something has to give. I don't know how they're going to turn that around, but they'll figure out something. The Andre the Giant Battle Royal was, it was cool seeing Shaq in there. The IC title match was awesome. Very good match. Very enjoyable. Then the main event, Roman Reigns, they just, part of me feels sorry for him. It's like, what does he have to do? But, I kind of understand why the boos are there. I mean, I don't think if I was in the crowd, I'd be there booing him, but, the mic skills just do nothing for you. The wrestling skills, I mean, he's an okay wrestler. The McMahons, we know they like a certain look, and he has that. I mean, look at him. He has the physique, and he has the package from that physical standpoint, but is there something missing? And so they force feed him. Now I think it's popular to boo him. It's in vogue, however you want to put it. Something has to give. My solution, just turn this guy heel. And I think the best way to turn him heel would be to use The Rock. They tried to use The Rock to make him a face, or to get him over, and it didn't work a couple Royal Rumbles ago. Him and The Rock, The Rock comes out, congratulates him or something, and he completely turns on The Rock. I think that's what's needed. You need this guy to be a super heel, because all the booing right now is not good for business when you're building him up as a face. You give this guy some heat, you let him beat up on The Rock, and you can get him into a program with Dean Ambrose. And when Seth Rollins returns, see, Seth is the one that could be the baby face. And so when Seth returns, you can see him versus Roman Reigns the way it should be, because the fans could get behind Seth, and the fans love to boo Roman Reigns. All right, guys, that's it for WrestleMania. Looking forward to seeing Raw, and it should be interesting. They got a lot of loose ends to tie up, so to speak, what to do with Roman, Shane, what they're going to do with that program, et cetera, et cetera. I guess we'll have to tune in and find out. Back to football. Like I told you guys, I have this obsession with the second round. And, every year, a big name, a name that was mocked in the first, for so long, just falls. It's a number of reasons. So what I've done the last 5 drafts, 2011 through 2015, I'll give you 2 names. One guy that dropped, supposed to be a first round pick, for whatever reason they dropped, and then a guy that went in the second round and really ended up being a true first round talent. Now, sometimes the person that drops and the person that's that huge talent is the same guy, but not always. So let's start with 2011, work our way down to 15, and then we'll end it giving you 5 names that could fit that bill in this year's draft and potentially for the Lions. So in 2011, the guy that dropped was Daquan Bowers. Now, he was supposed to be a first-round pick out of Clemson. I saw him mocked at number 1 a few times. Oh, and then that knee, man. The reports came out on that knee that he had a Jerry Mallory knee. You don't want a Jerry Mallory knee if you're trying to be drafted, and he had it. And if it wasn't for that, he would have been a first-round pick. But lo and behold, his stock just started to plummet and plummet. And then you thought, maybe at the end of the first round. It didn't happen. He went all the way to pick number 51, which is like around the late teens in the second round. Now, that knee never really checked out. He's always been up and down. You look at the tape before he got all shredded up in a bad way, and you say, this guy could have been special. But because of that, it never happened. Now, the huge talent that year was Randall Cobb. Ironically, the Lions wanted a fast, shifty guy in the slot, and they had a pick, where they could have got Randall Cobb. They went with, we know, Titus Young. But it is what it is. So there's the huge drop in Daquan Bowers, and the huge talent was Randall Cobb. He got picked actually at the very end of the second round. Now, in 2012, the guy that dropped and the huge talent is one in the same. It's Alshon Jeffrey. Tons of talent. The issue with Alshon was his weight. People didn't know, is it going to be the fat Alshon that's kind of sluggish, it doesn't give full effort, that, you can count on him half the time, but not all the time? Or will it be the beast that can be one of the best receivers in the league? Well, Alshon, he smartened up. He stayed thin. The work ethic is what they hoped it to be. And he's both the guy that dropped and the immense talent. Honorable mention in this year to Janoris Jenkins. There were character concerns for him. He was a guy that I wanted the Lions to pick at the end of the first round because he's a fine cornerback, and he has been doing pretty good at the NFL level. Now, in 2013, the guy that dropped was Manti Te'o. And, at one point, people were like, hey, this might be the 5th overall pick to the Detroit Lions. Well, that started to go out the window as people started to look at some of his physical limitations. All the accolades in the world, tons of talent at Notre Dame, but, he wasn't the fastest, and he started to get exposed. People looked at, was the national championship game where he just really looked out of place. And so he started to drop. And then, yes, there was the catfish situation, and he dropped to the second round. And, his career has been, I don't know. I'm not going to sit up here and act like I follow him. He hasn't really, stood out as anything special. And, he was someone that was supposed to be a first round pick. And because of the physical limitations, maybe a little catfish, he dropped to the second round. Now, the guy that's the true talent, there's a couple of guys this year. You got Kiko Alonso, you got Kawan Short. I'm going to go home with Michigan State and say Le'Veon Bell, one of the best young running backs in the NFL. Now, 2014, the guy that is the one that dropped, as well as the immense talent, once again, the same person, Derek Carr, quarterback, Oakland Raiders, one of the best young guys in the league. Now, the reason he dropped is simple. Maybe a little family legacy. That probably didn't, help him. The fact that David Carr had all of the accolades and didn't pan out. But seriously, there were needs for quarterbacks, but all those quarterbacks were kind of rated similarly. So it was a preference thing. And so, Blake Bortles was favored. Johnny Manziel, as well as Teddy Bridgewater. Now, Oakland, they loved him. They loved him some Derek, almost so much that there were rumors that they were considering drafting him with their top 5 pick. They really won because instead of risking it, and it wouldn't have been horrible if you look at the way Derek Carr is playing for a young quarterback, top 5. I mean, he's right up there with Blake Bortles. Wouldn't have been horrible, but they struck gold because they were able to draft him in the second round and get one of the best young, guys that can get after the quarterback in David. Excuse me. I'm sorry. It's late, guys. Wrestlemania. I think my coffee's worn off, so excuse me for the errors. They got one of the best young rushers in Khalil Mack. Honorable mention, second round pick, Allen Robinson. Very nice young receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, last year, it remains to be seen because, it's just 1 year, but the guy that dropped was Randy Gregory. All the talent in the world, but a little bit undersized and tons of character issues. The Dallas Cowboys said, you know what? We're going to draft you anyway. And it remains to be seen what's going to happen with them. Talented guys that dropped in the second round, that were in the second round. Maybe they were supposed to get mocked there. TJ Yeldon, running back for the Jaguars, having a pretty good career so far. Good rookie year. And then Ronald Darby, really good season as a cornerback for the Buffalo Bills. You know, whereas Marcus Peters got all the interceptions, Marcus Peters also gave up a ton of yards and touchdowns. Ronald Darby doesn't have the wild stats in terms of, interceptions, but the coverage was there. When you threw to him, there were problems. So with that being said, who this year kind of fits that scenario that could fall to the second round? I've got 5 names. I'll kind of give you the reasons why, and then I'll give you one honorable mention. We already know the big man, Robert Nkemdiche out of Ole Miss, from falling out of dorm rooms to, the talent not matching the production to other character issues, a guy with so much immense talent, but for one reason or another, it just didn't work out. And now, he could have been a surefire top 5 pick, no doubt about it, but people question his work ethic, the character, didn't put up the numbers that he was supposed to. There were times where he dominated, and then there was times where he just disappeared. A guy that has no business being in the second round may very well be not just a second round pick, but could even be available when the Lions are picking in the second round. Laquan Treadwell, I don't think ultimately he'll go all the way to the second round, but he's slow, okay? And that isn't a death sentence because you got guys like Hines Ward and Anquan Bolden and DeAndre Hopkins. Bigger, physical guys, great blockers. They use size and hands and, they use what they have. That's what Laquan Treadwell is. But he's slow. And that being said, speed, people love it. You can say what you want about the 40 time. It's overrated. It's used for the good and for the bad. And Laquan Treadwell is slow. So he may just fall to the second round. Reggie Ragland, I said this a couple weeks ago and people were like, there's no way. I'm telling you guys, I would not be surprised if he's there in the second round because, again, his measurables has not looked good. He kind of got exposed and at the Senior Bowl. Yes, he's a good tackler. He's good on first and second down. But the coverage, the lack of speed, I think it's going to haunt him. This isn't 1999. This isn't the 80s. Okay, your Brian Urlachers. It's a different NFL. You got safeties playing linebacker now. You got to be able to cover. You got to have some speed to go with being a sure tackler. And because of that, I could very well see Reggie Ragland going in the second round. Now, he won't last long. I could see teams lining up, calling, for that guy to be the first pick on Friday. But because of the reasons I just mentioned, he could very well fall. Andrew Billings, defensive tackle from Baylor. It's simple. This draft is loaded, okay, in defensive tackles. All of them won't be drafted in the first round. You're not going to have 12 guys. And so, Ashawn Robinson and Jerron Reed and Sheldon Rankins, I can go on and on and on. Someone's going to fall. I think Andrew Billings, because of a numbers game, could be one of those guys. Could be wrong, but we'll see. Jalon Smith, or is it Jalen? Not 100% sure. Linebacker, Notre Dame. Kind of the Daquan Bowers of this draft, because had he been healthy, wherever you see Miles Jack, insert Jalen Smith. So you're seeing Miles Jack as a consensus top 7-ish pick, it would have been Jalen. All the talent in the world, but his knee looks bad. Very bad. I don't think anyone's going to be brave enough to pick him in the first round because it's so much more guaranteed money, so much money in general for a guy that you're probably going to have to red shirt and then just hope he can be healthy. And then if he is healthy, will he be the same caliber of player after his knee just getting obliterated? And so I think he falls kind of similar to what we saw with Daquan Bowers. Honorable mention, this is a guy I said the Lions may very well draft in the first round, but because of character issues and concerns, there is a decent amount of talent. When you got a guy like Shaq Lawson that you can pick instead, or Emmanuel Ogba instead, it's Noah Spence from Eastern Kentucky. Talent-wise, should be a first rounder. But when you have other very well-suited defensive ends without character issues, he could be another guy that falls. Of all these names, let's bring this back to the Lions before we get out of here. Which one do I see fall into the Lions most realistically? I can see Jalen Smith actually falling. Now, Will the Lions pick him there? Not sure. We got a new guy in town. On the one hand, he knows he has several years. So you redshirt this guy if you feel comfortable with him because you won't be out the door. Now, you do have a coach who would probably say, can we draft someone that can help me and help the team this year? Because I might not have a job waiting on Jalen, however you want to pronounce it, Smith. So, the GM has time, could take the risk. The coach, who isn't picking players, but he does have influence, probably will be saying, give me the guy that can help this year. But of all the guys, I could see him dropping to the Lions most realistically because the injury concern is the realest. Whereas you can sometimes say, hey, I can work with this guy. I can coach him up character-wise. Hey, if the knee's shredded, it's only so much you can do. All right, guys, we had some fun today. Talked a little Wrestlemania. Talked a lot of Lions. It feels good sharing my obsession with the second round with you guys. It isn't just this year. I obsess over the second round every year. And so this time next year, I'll be doing the exact same thing, exercising my right and my need to share my obsession with you. All right, guys, we're getting closer and closer to the draft. We'll be back next Monday with more Lions goodness. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Jerry Mallory NFL. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. Until next time, this has been yours truly, Mr. Jerry Mallory for the Hindsight 20 podcast.